think for me, the biggest problem is I'm not getting any younger.
They've done some experiments on
Right.
mice and have
There you
reduced
go.
their age.
Look at AI on that problem.
I love that, going deep instead of going wide.
New formats have a little bit of risk, but the rewards go to the risk takers.
Welcome back to Raw AI Solutions, the podcast where we explore how business leaders are navigating the fast-moving world of AI and digital transformation. I'm your host, Denise Powell, and today we are joined by someone who has been at the forefront of immersive technology for over a decade, and he's worked with global giants like Coca-Cola, P&G, and Six Flags, blending storytelling with cutting-edge technology and to shape unforgettable customer experiences. So none other than Peter Oberdorfer, CEO of Tactic. Peter, delighted to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Peter, would you like to kick us off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your company?
We've been operating as Tactic for the past 10 years. I'm working with some of the people on my team who I've worked with for a number of years prior to that. I come from the film visual effects world, film and television, but primarily film tentpoles, and I had a company prior to this called Giant Killer Robots for 14 years that did a number of Hollywood tentpoles, like the Matrix trilogy and Spider-Man franchise. I was the visual effects supervisor for Fantastic Four, which is now coming back 20 years later in a reboot. But, worked on a number of films, Darren Aronofsky with The Fountain, What Dreams May Come. We had a couple Academy Awards, an Emmy, so that was like really fun, but all that started outsourcing and offshoring. And so the visual effects world was sort of rapidly disintegrating. And we made the business decision before 2008, thankfully, to kind of cease operations rather than double down. And I think it was the right one. And so I was sort of adrift for, I don't know, 6 months or a year, trying to figure out what the next thing might be. And our friend John Gata from the Matrix trilogy, he was the studio visual effects supervisor for that franchise with the Wachowskis. He was getting involved in some interactive work with Microsoft, and they were asking to kind of come up with prototypes and visualizations for a new device that they had called the Kinect. And the Kinect was, if you're not familiar with it, a gesture-based device that essentially kind of was like an early metaverse device, really. It's one that sort of broke the fourth wall and allowed people to inhabit spaces and interact with spaces through gesture, and where the device on the, on in front of you, you could interact with the screen just by moving around and inhabiting spaces and see yourself mirrored in those spaces, or, and so they were developing the hardware, but Microsoft, under Alex Kipman's department within Microsoft, they didn't have any real game prototypes at the time. So we got involved at a really early product stage, and were asked to come up with cinematic experiences like the Matrix or what have you, since we were a team that had worked on the Matrix movies and stuff before. Like, what kind of experiences can we make with this new device? And that got us into a whole thing with, like, game engines and interactive and, mixed reality and things like this. And and it was early days, and granted, like in 2008, 2009, 2010, like, it was pretty dodgy in terms of what devices could do in terms of that level of interaction. But we made some really fun sort of story based and immersive experiences, and even had a game start to get off the ground that was eventually scrapped by Microsoft, but we got pretty far into the deep milestones of sort of pre-release of a game there. And that kind of got me hooked. I kind of thought maybe instead of the big screen, I'll get involved in the small screen sort of experiential stuff, because it seems like the story hasn't been totally written on that, and this is an emerging technology that has some legs and can live for a while, and develop. Kind of, there's always the curiosity that keeps you going, and then this seemed like, rather than an established industry like film and
Mm.
visual effects, this is something where it's really unknown where this is going, and I wanted to be part of that. And so eventually, after a little bit of fits and starts, that venture that I did with John Gata kind of fell by the wayside, and I started Tactic, and this was around 2014. And with some of the team members from that prior group, with the Connect, we founded Tactic and started trying to leverage this as brand experiences, thinking that the idea of these interactive experiences using game engines had a future with brand experiences and products. And one of the first things that we kind of came up with was kind of the idea of activating things off of packaging. And 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 around that time, it was like iPhone 4, iPhone 5 sort of era. The devices were starting to be capable of doing this, and there were software platforms and libraries that we could use to do this. And then it really came down to, like, what is the applied creative for all of that? And that's where kind of I tried to, me and the team of animators and artists that I work with, tried to think of ways to make that fun and immediately interactive. And so we started telling stories, and this is what, like, a big one that we kind of started with fairly early. In it was called 19 Crimes Wine, and they, if you're not familiar with it, they all had different mugshots of prisoners who were banished to Australia in the 1800s. And so we thought, wouldn't that be cool to kind of bring these to life like the Harry Potter newspaper and have them tell their story? And the technology was ready for that, and we did that. And once we did, it was kind of an early use case of AR in product marketing, and millions and millions of people tried it. And back then, you had to even install an app; you couldn't do this over the web. But we had millions of people download the app, millions of people trying it. And what was great is, from in the marketplace, that meant that millions of people were picking up bottles of 19 Crimes, which meant that millions of people were buying them. And that, so their sales shot up 350% in the first 6 months for this product, or for this brand. And that had legs. And so we're like, okay, this is really something here. And so from that, we started doing activations for Coca-Cola, for um, Jack Daniels, for Beam Suntory, a lot of bottled products, beverages and things like that. But that expanded into, coffee, to food products, things like that. And then restaurant chains would do things. So we had, it kind of funneled out from there, and became a whole bunch of different types of product-based activations, which is what because we were early on it, we were sort of typecast in this vein. And we've been doing that ever since. It's sort of our bread and butter. And nowadays, we're starting to get more into, kind of what is emergent now. We always try to keep up with those sorts of things. And it's migrated from native apps into web-based activations, which you can just link to or QR code into and immediately be in the experience. But we've always sort of concentrated on things that scale well. And so, although we do in-place activations, like on screens or at venues, we think that what works really the best is to have people leverage their mobile devices, which are ubiquitous and bring everywhere. And then by activating those over the web, it means they don't have to install anything, and they can kind of just use their cameras and their processors on their device to have these, sort of story experiences that they can interact with. And I think that was really kind of the impetus behind the, the audience growth on this, and it was a very low friction environment for people to try these things out and show other people, and it can all be shared on the web and shared on social. So it's very portable, and the infrastructure is there, by default. People carry their phones everywhere. They're used to interacting with Insta and TikTok with their cameras anyway, so AR and XR make a lot of sense. And the platforms are highly capable. So all of that sort of came out of this evolution, and we're getting more into new things now, but always sort of leveraging what we've done in the past with our animation and refined visual effects from the film days, trying to bring that in so that there's this kind of seamless, uh, fourth wall open quality to what you're seeing. So what you're seeing through the camera of your phone looks like it's happening in the real world, and it's done with a level of seamlessness and integration and visual storytelling that kind of gets people to open up and have an emotional experience. All of those ingredients are essential, we think, to make for a fulfilling experience and one that can scale. And so that's kind of what we do, and that's kind of what we hang our hat on. But now there's new things. We're doing talking agents on these types of devices now and things like that. So now we look towards new platforms that we can scale on the web, and obviously one that's coming up are all the AI agents and things. And so we have these guys talking back to you now and being able to have conversations that are open ended rather than telling a one way story. So some of these things evolve over time. They evolve from native apps to web apps to multiple channels and platforms to talking agents and things that can kind of have more of an open-ended relationship with the end user. So I think it's really exciting, and we're always looking to new ways to kind of leverage these things. And I'm excited to see where the next 10 years of tactic are going
That
to
is
go.
really exciting, very interesting. And you're so right that seamless integration is absolutely key. But that actually leads us really nicely into today's topic, because in today's world, we're diving into something that touches almost every modern business, and that is how emerging technologies like AI and AR automation and how they're reshaping business operations, client expectations, and how we deliver value at scale. And those are the main issues that are challenges that are faced in the world out there, especially because this area is moving so fast. So the question is, when working with big brands like Coca-Cola or P&G, how much do they really understand about emerging technologies like AR, and how much of your role is about educating and shaping the art of the possible?
Oh, yeah. I think before we tell any of the consumers a brand story or any type of storytelling, we have to sort of explain to our clients kind of this is the potential of this technology and make it easy for them to understand kind of what the impetus is for why experiential marketing is so effective. Being able to explain kind of what the technology does in a simple and straightforward way, it is a big part of that. And then also being able to leverage existing networks that they're
Mm.
used to using, like the web, is essential. For those decision makers, they sort of have, ad budgets that are, along traditional media. And we have to sort of think about these things in ways that fit within those contexts. And then also to deliver a return on investment that makes a lot of sense. And none of these things happen in a vacuum. They all happen with existing media channels. And these are things that maybe as a niche industry, we don't take care of the out of home aspect, or maybe we don't do all the digital and social aspects. We specialize in what we do, but we're really good at tactic at integrating with existing marketing campaigns and looking at the brand guidelines, looking at existing campaign guidelines, and seeing where we fit in that strategically and functionally so that we can help tie all of this into that ecosystem and really kind of be the detonator for a lot of that stuff, I think, and and try to create excitement around that. So like, for White Claw, they had a summer concert sort of theme and series, and so we made an experience where you could have a private concert with Charlie XCX come up off of any White Claw product, and so that was a way to kind of use our medium to tie into this thing they're already doing with, giving away tickets and having sort of drink recipes that you would have at the concert and all this sort of thing. So like we tried to kind of make all of that kind of be a 360 kind of approach within their existing strategy. And we work not only direct to brand, but with and alongside traditional agencies to help that happen. And I think we can be kind of as niche providers, we can help inform not only the brands themselves, but the agencies they work with, how to most effectively use their marketing dollars in these sorts of mediums. So yeah.
And creative studios like yours are often used, they're often asked to do a lot more for a lot less, especially in budgets.
Yeah.
Whether that's faster timelines or tighter budgets, bigger impact. Where do you feel the most friction is in
Mhm.
scaling delivery without actually compromising creativity?
The wonderful thing about the web is it's pretty efficient in terms of spinning up more cloud instances and things like that. So like we can create a lot of scale and throughput for a pretty minor spend, and obviously we have to do that in the right way so that we don't have that, bite us later. But, if something is well designed, you can have millions of users, and in terms of that scalability, it doesn't require thousands of locations or uh, you know scores and scores of television monitors or anything like that. By leveraging web networks and mobile, we're using existing infrastructure for the most part, and the cloud is infinitely scalable and optimizable towards whatever the targeted marketing campaign is. So all of that works really well. I think, um, in terms of, figuring out what's going to be effective and things like that, we build upon the experience that we already have and try and move towards the new, so that each story kind of has its unique angle and fits to the brand as well as we can. Um, there's always a little bit of hand waving with this stuff, though. Like you really have to find the right partners who are interested in breaking new ground. And I think there is inherent risk in being new. So just like any sort of franchise sort of operation, people always were interested in Fast and the Furious 8 because it was going to make money more than they're going to want to launch a new franchise. Or in games, it's the same way. Like I think new formats have a little bit of risk, but the rewards go to the risk takers to a certain extent.
Absolutely. I fully agree with you there. And immersive activations are really exciting. They're very complex. So, what's your process like from moving from concept to delivery? And are there places where things get slowed down and start to get messy? How do you get that end to end?
Yeah, for process and delivery, like I think we usually work within a 12 to 14 week timeline with a new client. Um, and the first, 2 weeks or so is ideation before we commit to any sort of production environment. You got to remember this is software rather than post production and video. So, uh, whereas some video components and things like that, whether it be for digital, and social or broadcast TVC sort of stuff, you can turn that stuff around in a week or 2 or 3 weeks or whatever, and there's a high degree of polish you can get quickly with traditional media that's pre-rendered and not interactive. But with a piece of software, uh, not only is that a new format that takes some sort of a design stage, then you need to have the production stage be fairly substantial to build out. And then at the end, you make sure you need to, QC it so that there's, it's going to a wide audience and people are going to use it interactively and try and break it. And so there's a lot of, pieces in that arc. And although, we can tighten those timelines with clients that we've worked with repeatedly. I usually like to tell, new clients, if it's an ambitious project with a lot of content, let's plan on 12 weeks to get this done. And that sometimes doesn't fit within, we'll get a call 4 weeks out before an event, Super Bowl thing or something, and they'll be like, "Oh, we want to do this thing." I'll be like, "Well, we need to scan people, at a stage, and we need to do this and do that." And it's all very complicated logistics. And sometimes they just run out of time and we can't do it in that amount of time. And I have to be honest with them. Because we don't want to bite off more than we can chew either. And we want to be straightforward
You
about
don't
it.
want to be over promising and under delivering. Yeah,
Exactly. It's the opposite. We want to over deliver every
exactly.
time.
But you've
Yeah.
built some incredibly engaging experiences. Um, are you seeing any opportunities to turn those one-off campaigns into scalable solutions, especially using things like automation, templates, or AI? Or do you stick with the one-offs?
Well, I mean, we've created platforms for clients, and that's one way to kind of make them more than a one-off. I mean, I don't a lot of our not a lot, but like a certain percentage of our campaigns, uh, surprisingly, just run uh, indefinitely. Honestly, because they have sustained user engagement, and so it's a lot more like an app on the App Store in that regard, because people keep returning to the well. And we have full analytics stacks where we can see what the uses are, that we can make dashboards for our clients to be able to kind of see those results. But I think, like, in that vein, like, some clients have started these out as sort of one-off, 2 and 3 month marketing campaigns, and have since expanded the products that are included in that to a whole portfolio, sort of more of a portfolio app that works across a whole product line or multiple product lines. And then, we have some campaigns that have been running for 8 years now, and continue to grow. And they just become these sets of experiences that are almost like, uh, libraries of these things that we still see a lot of activity on each month. And have become kind of drivers for sales for some of our clientele when used that way. And I think that's a proper way to think about it. It's a little bit of a different format. So this is a lot more like, these are websites. They're just very interactive and visually driven websites. And so I think, uh, obviously, like a brand like Coke or 19 Crimes or whatever would not just stop having a website. That's indefinite, and they continue to update it and add to it. And that's the same goes for these XR sort of experiences. A lot of those just continue onward. And I think, what we can do on them continues to expand as the barriers of technology fall. So, it invites reinvention and expansion.
Actually, on that note, with a world that is moving so fast, and with all this new technology that's coming out there with AI and AR, mixed reality, how do you evaluate which technologies are worth experimenting with versus those that are just hype?
Well, I mean, I don't want to denigrate any specific technology. I can sort of say a little bit about what we might have had more success with than others. And I think what's on the frontier that excites me is generative AI. I see a lot of, like my social feeds just are full of like new things coming out every day. I've never seen technology advance that fast in the visual field. I would hate to be a traditional visual effects artist right now with all of the automation going on using generative AI as it applies to post production and visual effects. It's a bit scary how much labor saving devices are coming out in that field that will eliminate entire departments. But I do think that the fact that a lot of that technology is so potent is part of its appeal. And I think there's an audience for sort of people wanting to see what these things are. But I also think a lot of the imagery that's being generated, it takes an incredible amount of compute on the back end. And so uh, it's really about how does this new medium really, or this technology, how does it fit within the framework of, you know, audience consumption, uh, and when so much of it is creators themselves kind of creating 2D movies and 2D imagery, uh, you know, how does a brand get involved? How do brand experiences get designed for this? And I think, you know, one of the things we're seizing upon is, you know, scaling it on the web. So we have a system now where we're um, making expandable, you know, infrastructure for scaling experiences in parallel along the web that one could access interactively from their mobile device, and have the low latency and be able to do that very easily. And a lot of that is taking the existing pieces and integrating them in ways that, you know, just trying to be the first to do that in a way that makes sense, because all the pieces are out there. It's about just getting a nice integration to that for this use case. And then the other thing is, how do we kind of take the inherently the time frame and make it an immediate interactive experience, which is kind of what our bag is on our end. And that's where I think the AI agents come in. I think sort of taking the XR that we do, the AR and XR that we do, and mixing that with AI agents that are intelligent, that can tell stories and speak to the experience, and making that into a unified product that we can offer our clients. So if, you know, Charlie the tuna or Ronald McDonald can speak to you and you can have a conversation that, as sort of, you know, odd as that sounds, I think that's something that people are there for and would want to try out. And I think that's sort of the dream, is ultimately people are talking about wearables and, you know, seeing a layer of reality over everything they're walking around. And the more interactive and conversational that is with the environment you see around them, I think the more that's what things are moving towards. We want to be part of that current moving that way. So sort of a long-winded answer, like all my answers, but I do think that's kind of the thought process
No,
there.
that's fantastic. And one of the things that keeps coming up is we need to start using this responsibly. It's great that it's all out there, but if it's not responsible, it can really get us into trouble as well.
Yeah, and there are new tools coming out, like, you know, just I think a day or two ago, one called Moon Valley came out that was sort of ethically sourced models that, you know, used, you know, licensed materials and things like that. So we're very wary of that, is, you know, having permissions to use all of this. Uh, you know, when things are open source, you know, are they commercially licensable? So all the creators on the back end, we want to make sure either are credited, or there's some sort of economy behind that, because I do feel like it's a real threat to traditional labor structures with a lot of this AI generation, and especially in my old industry, with, you know, movies and broadcast media. It's just it's a thing, you know. But I do think in the area of kind of creating talking avatars, this is one that I feel a little bit could be a different way of storytelling, and it doesn't necessarily uh, it's not a job killer or anything like that. And my attitude about these technologies is they're neutral or they're inevitable. It's a Pandora's box that we can't stuff back in the box. And so AI is happening, and to sort of rail against it is futile. And I think finding ways to use it where, you know, you're kind of harnessing what's powerful about it, but trying to do it in a way that's ethical, that credits the creators, and that expands the capabilities of what you're already doing, is the way to approach it. And I will say, like, kind of as an employer, we've worked with the same team for these 8 years, and we have a lot of continuity. And I would rather have my team learn these new tools if they come up, whatever they are, rather than replace them and kind of cut our losses all the time, or have one person creating everything instead of our entire team. I think I do believe in longevity of experience, and just having people always learning. And so I don't want to close myself off to this AI as a result. That's important. I think this is a really revolutionary moment. And just like we were excited about AR and XR, I think AI is for real. I think we were a little bit distracted with the crypto stuff for a little while, and I think that may have sort of not proven to be quite as potent as some thought it would be, especially in the worlds we work in. The whole Web3 hype might be dying down, but I do think there's a place to kind of merge interactive with generative AI, and there's going to be a sweet spot, and there'll be a lot of rewards for people who get involved with that, both creatively and financially.
Absolutely. Um, for small,
Yeah.
well, high impact teams like yours, um, partnerships, um, are they the key to actually staying ahead when it comes to emergency technology, whether that's AI, AR, back end automation? Um, do you do a lot of partnerships? And if so, what do you look for in a partner to help you deliver smarter or faster?
I've always been bootstrapped to my I run my business like a bakery or a dentist's office. I form a team, and like working with my team and try to go deep rather than wide. We have taken on partners. I have an affiliation with my actual business partner, Nathan Robinson, owns a group of small agencies and production houses under the mantle of Entropic, and they do traditional VFX for broadcast. And they have a lot of capable people that do that sort of work. And occasionally we cross pollinate with them if we need to expand our team. But what's wonderful about that is they're a little larger than we are, and they have like 5 offices around the world. We're not formally affiliated with them, but we're like cousins, right? And so we operate in a different space. We're not competitive with them. And we know all of them because we actually used to cohabitate when we had a brick and mortar office in one of their offices in San Francisco. And so we're able to sort of bolt in people who we know well, and we know their capabilities as we need to. So it's sort of a built-in partnership that's in the family that way. So that allows us to scale for most projects. And then from my days in film and early interactive, I have a group of like trusted folks that I can work with as well, whether they're small entities or individual freelancers. That's taking care of everything we need, and we rarely scale to a point where something's completely out of control. I have an aversion to kind of driving ahead of our headlights too much. So everything has to be sustainable, and that's really the rule for me. I don't want to go for the great white whale or anything and end up bankrupt, because we are self-funded and bootstrapped the whole way, and it's worked
Yeah,
really well for
I,
us.
I love
So
that, going deep instead of going wide, and also I
yeah,
also love that,
yeah.
like, know me, like me, trust me, part of that network, and yeah, that's really awesome.
It's habit more than knowledge, though. There's probably a great way to do it some other way. It's just the way uh, I've done it through my career. So until it doesn't work, I'm probably gonna be
Stick with
stuck with
what
this
works,
way.
yeah.
So
So Peter, moving
yeah.
to tactic, where would you like your business to be in the next 6 to 12 months?
Well, I mean, I think some of our ambitions are format based, right? And I don't want to say technology or creative necessarily, but I think about it as format, like new formats of interaction. Um, just discovering those. I want to have the opportunity to bring those to new clients and that entails finding clients, the right clients that are eager for that type of content. So I think, we'll know ourselves if we're succeeding there, but I do think like finding new ways to explore and learn has always been profitable for us, both emotionally and financially. And I think, it's keeping that up. It's sort of keeping that plate spinning. So I can see us not necessarily growing in size, but in capabilities over time. And that's really kind of what my goal is over the next 5 years, say. But I do think we're kind of at a critical juncture right now with this AI stuff. And so it's really transforming things quickly. And the audience will define kind of where a lot of our horsepower goes.
Absolutely. And so, what is your biggest
Yeah.
challenge that you're facing right now? Is that finding clients, a new clientele?
Well, it's certainly not finding talent. There is a lot of talent out on the market, and the big tech sort of shrinkage like has made a lot of there's a lot of capable engineers and artists out of work after say a lot of these companies are laying off people in XR with their whether it's Meta or Unity or other groups like that. There's a lot of great people out there um, looking for work, unfortunately. But I think, because we're an org that's autonomous and able to do our own thing, um, we've been sort of a bit immune to that and have been growing. And I think we'll make some careful additions over time. But I don't necessarily have I don't really know where all of that is going to go, but I do think there'll probably be a refactoring of this over the next year or two. And then I expect a lot of growth in the tech space again around AI as people retrench around sort of the new paradigms. And then I think we will follow in that and try and find our role as a niche provider that's independent of the bigs. And we've always been able to coexist because there's always a need for like a crack troop that's kind of independent. We're already, I will say, I can't speak too much about it, but we already are sort of embedded in a very large org where we're providing platform expertise and content. Um, and it's out there and it's getting hundreds of thousands of users every month. But I can't speak to what it is, but it's something we're already doing. And we hope to make new relationships like that in parallel. And that really would be a cause for scaling if we sort of replicate that model, because I think it would require we'd have a bunch of tactics doing that. Then so
Yeah, absolutely.
um,
So, the one
yeah.
question is, if you could solve one issue today at like a snap of a finger, what would it be?
Oh gosh, it wouldn't have anything to do with my work. I tell you that. No, I'm fairly content right now, believe it or not. I think there's always problems. They seem constant. Um, and I'm impatient about the advance of some of these things. Um, but that's where the business uh, thrives, is being able to solve those problems a month or two before the next tactic does. And so I think as long as we're nimble and keep learning, I think that's going to be, it's a bit of a road answer, but I do think, yeah, we're not looking, we're not seeing this new sort of growth of AI as being like a huge challenge. I think this is just an exciting sort of juncture, and I'm not looking at it as a
Yeah.
problem.
Well, I love what you said. Just be nimble and learn quick. That's so true.
Yeah. Yeah, and no, and I think for me, the biggest problem is I'm not getting any younger. So being in tech at my age is probably not great. So that's a problem. But until they reverse aging, I don't really know
Well,
what to do
apparently that's in the cards already. So they've done some experiments, I think, with
about it.
mice and they've
There you
reduced
go.
their age.
We'll get AI on that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, brilliant. Well,
yeah,
Peter, this
yeah.
has been such
But
an insightful conversation. And so thank you for sharing how you've navigated some of your creative and technical and operational side of bringing immersive technologies into some of the biggest brands that we've known and some of the movies we've all heard about. But before we wrap up, is
sure.
there one piece of advice that you'd give to another founder or creative leaders who are trying to harness emerging technologies like AR or AI to stay competitive and deliver real value at scale?
Like one of the things that annoys me a little bit is when people get starry-eyed about the tech, but they don't really think about scale. And there's so many examples of this, not just with the AI stuff, but with XR and the like, where it's a cool story about a particular use case, but you're kind of thinking about it. And if you really think for a moment about it, you're like, how many people can you get through the door to experience this use case in the way it's being implemented? So one of the biggest things that a company like ours can solve is like, how do we add scale to this? And so it's kind of intrinsic in your question, like, how can you do this at scale? Well, we'll see things where, um, brands will have, you require a ticket and then you got to be in a certain place to do it. And then you got to have the code to do it, or things like this that are just barriers of entry along the whole way. And it's important, a lot of these new tech things are democratized to the point where people with very little interest or motivation are going to take this on and try it, because that's the only way to get things to go viral. And so we really try and design in some ways to the lowest common denominator of effort, so that it's as frictionless as possible. Because believe it or not, as excited as I am or you might be about these new technologies, not everybody's going to go out and shell out $800 for the latest pair of smart glasses or what have you. And so you really have to think about, like, what will people be willing to do that's in this realm, and really design towards that. I would love to. We started out doing a lot of virtual reality, and I think Meta has plowed $15 billion or whatever it is into it. They could have probably launched a moonshot with that amount of money, and instead they have, the Quest, which is a wonderful, amazing device. And I'm so glad that they had all those troops die at the castle wall to make that device. But that's not the kind of investment that a small company like ours is ready to do. So if you're a small company, let the big companies plow all their money into those losses to create the environment and play space where we can do our thing. But even the Quest only has 20 million users, and so, or something like that, globally. So if you're thinking about, like, where's the audience, mobile devices like the iPhone have billions and billions of users, or Android phones, and whereas that we can deploy to everyone, versus a segment that maybe is a lot smaller and maybe not as important to advertisers, like the Quest. And so it's a tough choice, because I think the Quest is a compelling experience and a wonderful medium, but it may be better for enterprise and institutional, for example, and training, than it would be for wider consumer experiences. And it's choices like that we try to think about when we're offering these services to our clients, to see how can you get, some scale to this, and not just have it be a shiny toy.
Absolutely. I think you
So
said it a couple of times now. It's
yeah,
about having that inbuilt infrastructure on everyone's mobile devices. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, because otherwise, what's the point? It's a tree falling in the woods. It could be the most beautiful tree with all kinds of ornaments hanging on it, but the merit of the project doesn't matter if no one sees it.
Absolutely.
So,
Fully agree with you
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Well, Peter, finally, if listeners want to learn more about tactic or reach out to yourself, where's the best place that they should go?
Probably email info@wearetactic.com. That's our sort of our general, or go to our website at tactic.studio, and there's contact tabs in there where they can get a hold of us, and I'll probably reply if they get a hold that way, but that's a good filter. So I'm not getting calls at home at midnight, but yeah, we are no longer brick and mortar. All my employees prefer working at home, and I'm a softie, and I like doing my laundry while I work too. So we are a virtual agency now and leaning into it.
That's fantastic. Love to hear it. Well, Peter, thank you so much for
Yeah.
your time, and thank you for joining us. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Very nice talking to you, Denise.